Anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
I have something called Raynaud disease, which right here you could see my finger is purple, which is because there's no blood circulation in it. This is triggered by cold air, water, holding a cold drink, and it happens from my wrist to my fingertips and my ankles to my toes. So the one day I'm coming from chemistry, which is on the 3rd floor, to the basement for health class, and it's really cold in the basement. And this kicks in pretty quickly. So basically imagine this, but on all 5 of my fingers. My teacher was absent, so we had a sub. And to fix it, I have to put heat on it. So when I went up to my substitute teacher and said, I need to go to the nurse, it hurts, it's hurting me. He said, wait till I take attendance. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, let me ask again. And he goes, no. I started bursting out crying because of the pain. Part 2 is out. Here's part 2 of the story I just said. If you haven't watched it, go watch it right now. This will make more sense. So he says no, and at this point, I'm bawling my eyes out, crying. I'm in so much pain. So I go sit down and I'm talking to my friends, and they're like, hey, go, you have to go tell him what's going on. And so I go up to him and I show him my purple hands. Both hands, completely purple at this point. Mind you, I've told him before that I have this disease in my hand. And he goes, what class did you have before this? And I told him chemistry. And he goes, did you spill chemicals on you to make it turn purple? And I said, no. And he goes, did you put paint on your fingers? And I said, no, why would I put paint on my finger? I was like, I have a problem. It's a disease. I can't help it. And he goes, oh, why didn't you say that? Oh, duh. I told this guy 5 minutes ago. If it was paint on my hands, why would I be crying? The audacity. I literally spent 20 minutes in the nurse crying.
Firstly, I'm going to say, don't watch this if you're below the age of 12. I don't know kids these days. I don't know. But anyway, I've diagnosed gender identity disorder, or gender dysphoria. I'm a tranny, basically. And my principal told me that being uncomfortable wasn't a good enough excuse. I also have an anxiety disorder diagnosed as well. And while I was having a panic attack, and when you're having a panic attack, you can't exactly breathe properly. And she told me, with her face in my face about this close to, it was just like, just breathe. It normally helps. And on a side note, she also said to me that we couldn't have trans education in the school because some of the first years still believed in Santa.
Alright, so there's a lot that went into the story, but let me just start by saying I do actually have autism. Whether you believe it or not, I don't care. So back in 5th or 6th grade, I was in what they call the special needs class, right? And I was the only kid who could really talk in that classroom. And let's just say I got to see some stuff that really should never have happened, especially to those kids and me. So one day I asked to use the bathroom, and since I was really the only kid who could talk, they just let me to use the bathroom by myself. After I did my business, I just decided to get up and leave the school. I was trying to go home. And as I was walking, I didn't know how they knew I was missing right away, but they started getting their cars and literally follow me. One even told me, hey, you want to go for a ride? I'm thinking, who the hell says that? Then some cop cars were starting to head towards me. For part 2.
Anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
Part 2. So I was walking on a bridge. Then I start to see some cop cars heading towards me, and I'm like, well, they're probably after somebody else. They're not looking for me. Then they started to slow down and then get out the car. Me knowing that I'm black and me knowing that I didn't want to get murdered, I tried to jump over the bridge. They grabbed me and pinned me down before I even got a chance to jump. And here's the real kicker. They put handcuffs on me and forced me in the back of the car. I was angry. I was scared. And I didn't know what to do. I'm thinking I'm going to jail. And, oh, God bless her soul. My mom swooped in and saved me from whatever it is what was about to happen. Because I remember getting out of the police car, hugging my mom, getting in her car, and then the teacher started to follow us home. For part 3.
Anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
Part 3. I promise this is the last one. So I got in my mom's car. Just straight up silence. There wasn't even talking in the car, right? Then she pointed out that the teachers were following us home. And the police. I was freaking out. I didn't want them to come in the house. As we were pulling up at our driveway, they were getting out the car. And after all that situation, they asked if they could come in. Me and my mom were like, hell no. She told me to go in the house and she would talk to them outside. I'm not sure what was discussed, but all I know is I didn't go back. And I think one of the last things the teacher said to me was, you really should be in jail. All I could do was cry. Not only I had to deal with my mess, but I felt bad for the kids who had to deal with their mess.
To anyone that has a disability or disorder, what's the worst thing a teacher's ever said about it?
So I'm colorblind, and in sophomore year, I took an art class because, easy A, come on. And we were doing a color comparison chart where we take like paint chip samples from the local hardware store and then trying to recreate the colors on the grid. And I told my teacher, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do color comparison. I'm colorblind. She's like, oh, just try your best. And so I did. I turned in the homework assignment. I got it back, and it was a C+. So I asked her, I'm like, what's going on? Why do I have a C+ on this assignment? And she goes, well, you didn't match the colors correctly. Bitch, I'm fucking colorblind.
I have a neuromuscular disorder called dystonia, and it's a functional disorder, so things trigger it. In 10th grade, I had fitness at the end of the day, like the very end of the day, like 5th period. And we were doing this exercise this one day, pushing like a 25-pound weight across the floor, like on a towel. And about halfway through the class, this triggered my back, and my back really started to hurt, and I started to get like this, because that's what happens. And I told my teacher, and she was like, you're fine. It's almost the end of the day. So I was like, okay, so I kept going. A couple minutes later, I literally couldn't walk and I couldn't breathe because my rib and my hip were crushing my right lung. So I went over to my teacher and I was like, I need to call my mom. I need to go home now. I need my meds. I couldn't bring my meds to school because they were opiates. So, controlled substance. Meanwhile, I could barely even talk to her and tell her I needed help because I literally could not breathe. And she said, no, you can wait. Part 2's already up. Okay, part 2. One of my good friends, heard what was going on, and she knew about, what was going on with me, sort of thing. She was like, she needs to call her mom. The teacher then got a little bit concerned because she could hear that I literally couldn't breathe, because this is what my breathing sounded like. After she clued into the fact that I literally couldn't breathe, this bitch did a 180. It was no longer, you need to wait till the end of the day. It was now, we need to call an ambulance. I was bawling my eyes out, couldn't breathe, in so much pain, and I'm like, I don't need an ambulance. I just need to call my mom and get my meds. I just need to go home. And she was like, oh, no. So she called 911. When the paramedics got there, they needed to search my bag for whatever reason, and the vice principal was there helping them search my bag. The vice principal then found my vape, which was a suspendable offense. I'm sorry, part 3 is already up. Part 3, the vice principal looked at me and goes, did you smoke something? I was like, no, bitch, I have a fucking disorder. Keep in mind, this shit was like a box mod with fucking zero nick. There was, Anyway, so the paramedics picked me up and put me on the stretcher. There were so many exits they could have taken considering it was the end of the day and everyone was in the atrium. But they decided to roll me through the entire school to go out the front door at the end of the day. So I was lying on the stretcher, bawling my fucking eyes out, also strapped down to it because I was losing my shit because I literally didn't need to go to the hospital, and I was like, oh my god, they're gonna tell my mom about the vape. So I was losing my shit, so they strapped me down to the fucking stretcher and rolled me out while I was crying and couldn't breathe in front of literally the entire student body. And then they took my ass to the hospital. I can't even put into words the embarrassment I felt when I went back to school a couple days later.
I got you. So in the midst of all this, no one fucking called my parents. No one thought, oh, this 16-year-old girl can't fucking breathe. She's strapped to a stretcher in an ambulance on her way to the hospital. Her parents work an hour away. Maybe we should fucking call them and let them know, maybe? Anyway, so my vice principal came with me in the ambulance to the hospital. And when we got there, she called my parents. As I previously mentioned, my parents work an hour away. And the whole time we were just sitting there waiting for my parents or waiting for the doctor to come see me. I couldn't breathe. I was strapped to the stretcher, freaking the fuck out still. And the fucking vice principal is just grilling me about the vape she found in my bag, which was making me cry even harder and making the situation even worse. Within the next hour, my parents got to the hospital, and the first thing this bitch did was tell them about the vape. Let me know if you want a part 5. Probably the last part. Also, let me know if you want me to do more story times. Anyways, my mom didn't get mad about the vape because she was more focused on the situation at hand. She wasn't even that concerned about me because we both knew that I just needed my medication. This was not the first time that this had happened. She was just more concerned with how the school decided to handle it. Anyways, I spent the rest of the night, probably 5.5 to 6 hours at the hospital, and the doctor sent me home with the same meds I told my teacher I needed to go home and take in the first place. The fucking embarrassment I had a couple days later when I went back to school, what I can't even put into words. All of my friends knew what was going on, and I was fine with them knowing. But I really wasn't looking to have the entire fucking student body see me having a fucking panic attack, not being able to breathe, strapped down to a stretcher, being rolled into an ambulance. So yeah.